Hello, and welcome to the IFRA podcast, Behind the Scents, brought to you by the International Fragrance Association. I'm Charles de Lusignan, and each month we bring you closer to the people shaping the future of fragrance, the art, the science, and the rules of an industry that touches lives all around the world. Most months we open with a story, but this month we open with a deadline, because Europe has just agreed the biggest change to the rules governing fragrance ingredients in years. It's called the Omnibus 6. And if you've ever wondered whether your favourite perfume, candle or soap will still be on the shelf in a few years from now, this one matters to you. To explain what was at stake and what happened and what happens next, I'm joined by someone who is in the room for it. Aurélie Perrichet is the Regional Director for Europe at IFRA, and she has spent the past year, or even more, at the centre of these negotiations and advocacy work. Aurélie, welcome to the Behind the Scents podcast. So, before we get into the detail, I want to start with a little bit about you. So, EU affairs advocacy isn't perhaps a career that many of us dreamed of as kids. How did you get here?
Yes, it's true, and Europe is not very visible in our day-to-day life. But when you are based in Brussels, you also realize how Europe is shaping our way of life, our rights, also for European citizens across Europe, and being also part of this negotiation, decision-making process representing a sector to shape also the legislation and the policy initiative is quite fascinating on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so it's something that you ended up with, but having got here, you're happy.
I'm very happy.
Your role as Regional Director for Europe puts you right at the centre of many key files affecting fragrance. For anyone who pictures Brussels as a maze of acronyms and meeting rooms, what does your work actually involve?
So our day-to-day work in Brussels is representing the voice of the fragrance industry in Europe and worldwide. Behind this term, fragrance industry stands many companies, hundreds of SMEs across Europe, half of them being SMEs. So it's quite important to also represent the voice of these companies, represent the voice also of the perfumers, which are creating the fragrances that enlight also the life of consumers, and be part of this European negotiation, also shaping the future of the sector.
Yes, I think the perfumer's role in this is obviously quite essential. They are affected by what's happened. So perhaps let's get into that. So this is the Omnibus 6. Sounds like something you might ride around London and be bright red, but apparently it's more than that. What is the Omnibus and why does it matter to fragrance?
Yes, omnibus, it is true. It's like a term used very much in this European jargon. Basically, when the new European Commission was appointed in 2024, they had as a key priorities to rebuild also this trust in the European Union, to rebuild also investment on the European region, given that some concerns were observed about the lack of competitiveness of the European region. Basically, the regulatory burden was seen as one of the key concerns for companies to invest in Europe. 1 out of 2 companies noting that this regulatory burden is a key concern for them to invest in Europe. So this is why Europe started, and the European Commission started to adopt a number of texts, which would be called Omnibus, in order to simplify the existing legislations. And why Omnibus? Because in one Omnibus regulation, you would basically change different pieces of existing legislation.
Because you mentioned touching various pieces of legislation. Help me understand the scale of this. Is this only fragrance? Is this cosmetics? Is this any product you put it in or on your body? What's the scale of this?
If you look in general of all the omnibus packages already in the process since 2024, I think we are reaching 10 omnibus now package, affecting different sectors of the economy, from food, from chemicals, from defense, from sustainability. What matters for us is the Omnibus 6 on chemicals. On this Omnibus 6 on chemicals, refer particularly to 3 legislation. The regulation first on the classification, labeling, and packaging of chemical substances. The second one on the cosmetic regulation with some targeted changes, and then the third one on fertilizers.
Okay, that sounds like it's been going on for quite some time then. How long are we talking? How long has this process taken?
For the scale of the European decision-making process, this is quite short. Although indeed we've been working on this Omnibus 6 regulation for almost a year now. In beginning of 2025, the European Commission started to launch also consultation to see what could be included in this Omnibus 6 on chemicals, on the classification and labeling of substances, on the cosmetic part, to understand what was the concern raised by the different stakeholders, industry, NGOs, consumer groups, but also from the national authorities, including also the enforcement bodies, which are in charge also of implementing this regulation, to see what would be the concern on how to find solutions. This started in Q1, Q2 2025, and then in July 2025, Commission released its Commission proposal, building on all the intelligence insight received from stakeholders and member state authorities.
Can you perhaps summarize very briefly what were some of these key findings, and therefore what were some of the changes that they wanted to make?
Yeah, definitely. So for the fragrance industry, 2 points were particularly important. First, for the classification labeling of substances, some proposal from the European Commission was seen as very valuable in terms of formatting requirements for small packaging. We use a lot of small packaging in the fragrance industry, in the B2B discussion, and therefore having some more flexible formatting requirement for small packaging was seen as particularly important, as well as also some timeline to also update the labels to avoid also waste of product, waste of labels also within the companies. So this flexibility was ultimately granted in the final text and is very welcome also for the sector. And the second big one was around the cosmetic regulation. So today we see more and more ingredients being classified in the fragrance industry, despite the fact that safe use can be demonstrated for these ingredients. And as soon as these ingredients are classified, they are automatically banned in cosmetics.
So let me stop you there. So does that mean that an ingredient can be assessed as being safe, potentially, at least in its use case, and then be banned anyway?
Before the Omnibus 6 framework, the industry could never get indeed a derogation for an ingredient which was classified despite a demonstrated safe use. And given the rise of classification happening in the fragrance industry, more and more ingredients being classified, the big concern for the sector was the ban of these ingredients despite safe use. And this is one of these things that the Omnibus tried to solve now, to allow for a workable route for the derogation procedure, to allow these ingredients to continuously being used in cosmetics if safe use and other criteria are demonstrated.
But you were saying now then that there were chemicals, there were fragrance ingredients that were being classified and not getting a derogation. Perhaps you can answer me again. What's the scale? How many is this? Is this 10? Is it 100? How important are these? And in a sense, why wasn't the industry able to get derogations? What was the reason? Was there a safety reason? Was it a science reason? Was it a policy reason?
Yeah, so these are good questions. So in 2017, 10 years ago, we had around 3 ingredients classified. Now we see 10 ingredients being classified, and these are really key ingredients. Either ingredients which are part of natural ingredients, like parathymine, and basically used in hundreds of natural ingredients, which pose the question about the continued use of these natural ingredients in cosmetics if we wouldn't have a clarified approach also in the legislation. And then key ingredients also used in some iconic perfumes, iconic cosmetic product, which also are part of the brand identity. You smell this ingredient, this is also a recognition of the brand, of the cosmetic manufacturers, of the brand that you like. So losing this ingredient tomorrow would be losing a part also of the perfumer's palette, and without safety benefits because we can demonstrate that these ingredients can be safely used.
So they can be safely used. It can be demonstrated that in many cases these can be safely used.
Yes, behind all these ingredients, there is a long history of safe use, which are also backed by the REFIM safety evaluations, which is also the core of this safety approach for the fragrance industry. And moreover, the cosmetic manufacturers, they also always have in hand also like a cosmetic safety report to also substantiate the safety evaluation for the final cosmetic product.
Okay, that's good. So now the political process is over. Where are we now? What's the most important thing that's now changed? And what are people saying that this derogation route you're mentioning, is that now workable? Is that more workable? Is it going to work?
Yes, at least we hope so. Now we have a clear text also in the European Union. So since the Commission cosmetic regulation was adopted in 2009, the sector was very much struggling more than 15 years to get a single derogation out of this process. Now with the Omnibus 6, there is good hope that also with the revised criteria, the new timelines also put in place within the text, there will be more visibility also on the process, more clarity, and also a process which is rooted on more solid also criteria for allowing or not a derogation to go through.
No agreement is perfect, though. And do you expect this agreement to work in practice? The European Union has been known to reopen dossiers soon after having published them. Is there a risk here if it doesn't work? Will the industry be satisfied?
Here, we very much count also on the Commission and also on the member states also to work on the basis of the agreement which has been reached also by the Parliament and by the Council. There will be also a Commission guidance document that will also be developed and adopted in order to facilitate also the implementation of the Omnibus 6. And of course, our sector would also call for some pragmatism also in the interpretation of the rules so that the intent also of the legislators are kept. The objective is to make things simple and to allow for derogation to go through when safe use can be confirmed and when a reasonable burden also of evidence has been demonstrated by the industry when derogation dossiers are submitted. So we very much also hope that this reasonable burden of proof will remain also the request from the member state, from the Commission, so that when derogation dossiers are solidly built with good evidence and with also a backing from the Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety about the safe use of the ingredient, then the ingredient can continue to be used in cosmetics.
Now, the derogation is requested by industry, I understand.
Yes.
What's the because some people might think it's a murky business, which of course it may be. You tell me. What's the level of independence? Who ultimately decides if there is a derogation? Does industry have a hand in that?
So the core element which is preserved in the Omnibus 6 is the fact that no ingredient can continue to be used if they are not backed by a positive safety evaluation by an independent committee.
So this is a scientific evaluation.
Exactly.
Right.
It is a scientific safety evaluation conducted by the highest safety body for cosmetics, which is called SCCS, Scientific Committee on Consumer Safety. It's an independent committee with experts in cosmetic safety, recognized also worldwide. So the safety evaluation performed by the SCCS are looked also in other regions of the world. And these are independent scientists. Should the scientific committee confirms that the use of an ingredient is safe for cosmetic, this criteria is the core element then to decide whether or not an ingredient which is classified can continue to be used in cosmetics.
Okay. Now, that was the agreement. Two things then, I suppose. How long till this comes into force? When does it start affecting things on my shelves? But also, presumably, sometimes a derogation gets refused. Certainly, that you mentioned that was the case before. What does that mean? The changes mean for manufacturers of fragrances and fragrance ingredients? now? What does that mean in terms of the timelines they now have?
Yeah, definitely. This is an important element given that there are also derogation dossiers currently under review. One of them is, for instance, heliotropin. The use of the industry is asking for derogation for the continued use of heliotropin in fine fragrances at certain maximum concentration. This dossier has been reviewed by the scientific committee. We are expecting soon, let's say, the result of the safety evaluation. And the question will also be whether or not the Commission and Member States decide whether there is or not a suitable alternative to heliotropin. If they consider there is a suitable alternative to heliotropin, the derogation dossier will not be accepted. If they consider there are no alternatives, the dossier will be, the derogation should be granted. And as an industry, we've been providing a number of information, quite substantial information, to explain why heliotropin cannot be replaced in fine fragrances because of the olfactive characteristics. Some perfumers even came to the meetings with the member state and the commission to clearly explain why in practice we could flag on no differences between heliotropin and the potential other alternatives.
So you're saying that if there's no derogation, in some cases, the fragrance on my shelf might change within the next year or two if the ingredients in it happen to have been evaluated and found not according to the process, be derogable from.
The objective would be with this derogation to allow for the formulation to remain on the market by allowing for this derogation to go through.
Having been demonstrated that it's safe.
Yes,
Okay.
and the preliminary opinion of the SCCS is positive, which let us think that also in the coming days or weeks we will see a positive final opinion from the scientific committee. And now the question will be about the assessment of alternatives.
You're the regional director for Europe at IFRA. IFRA is obviously an international association. We represent fragrance houses all around the world, big and small. Tell me, what does this mean in Europe? Right? Like, what's the value of the fragrance industry in Europe, and what does it contribute to the economy? So, through that, what would the impact have been had this omnibus gone less well?
Mm-hmm. So indeed, the fragrance and the wider cosmetic value chain is valued at 180 billions in Europe, and we have
Billion with a B.
Billion, yes, exactly. Billion euros for the whole value chain, and we have a lot of European countries which have also a positive trade balance, given also the importance of the cosmetic industry exports, and of course fragrance are a key component also for the diverse product also available to consumers in terms of cosmetic and personal care product. And today, based on the estimation made a few years ago by the sector, around 70% of the cosmetic product contain fragrances. And
75%.
70%.
70%.
70%
of cosmetic products that contain fragrances.
Yes, exactly. And out of this percentage, we estimated that 85% of this fragrance cosmetic product were about to face some restriction, reformulation out of this concern linked to the automatic ban of classified ingredients.
So with a knock-on effect potentially for the industry worth billions, hundreds of product categories facing
Yes.
reformulation. So success for you looks like making sure that safe products remain on the market without one of Europe's leading industries facing huge costs that would actually achieve no necessary benefit for the consumer, is your point?
Yes, exactly. And I think it's not only about industry benefits at the end or socioeconomic benefits. It's also about clearer rules for the enforcement bodies, for the member state authorities, because today they were struggling also with the legislation which was unclear, with unclear criteria. unclear derogation procedure. So this also makes sense for member states to also have more visibility on how also for themselves to also apply the law, and also for consumers. There was no safety benefits in industry running all this reformulation. Most of the R&D, innovation department resources were spent into this constant reformulation, while tomorrow having also some resources free from the industry to innovate for breakthrough ingredients, more sustainable product makes sense for the consumers. And consumers are also looking for this innovation, which makes sense for them. So in this text, it's a big win for everyone, for the consumers, for the authorities, and also for the industry.
Oh, that's very nicely said. If there's a final summary you'd like to give me, like what are the three main takeaways for the omnibus, for the industry, for the policymaker and the consumer, what would that be?
At the end, it was a very long process, 12 months for an omnibus, but very short also when we look at the decision-making process in Europe. What is important is that safety has been preserved. Safety remains, cosmetic safety remains also the core criteria for deciding on the use of an ingredient in cosmetics. It's very reassuring for all of us, all consumers, also on a day-to-day basis of cosmetic and personal care product. But also simplification is brought. The required simplification for from the European Union is also brought to consumers, to authorities, and to the industry. And now we count also on member states and the Commission to be able to implement this, translate this in practice, so that we can see the result of these outcomes in the ongoing dossier under evaluation.
Thank you, Aurélie. A very clear introduction to the omnibus and what it means for the fragrance industry. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. And thank you to the listeners of the podcast. You'll be able to find more information about IFRA and the IFRA Behind the Sense podcast at ifrafragrance.org. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have. So please do not hesitate to contact us at info@ifrafragrance.org. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you all.